Hello YouTubers, welcome back to Adventures in Manufacturing Nitric Acid, or urban gold mining. Yeah. So I'm making nitric acid again today for use in my gold refining hobby, but I'm doing it a little different today. I got the idea after the last run, if I bought another boiling flask and had a second one, I could swap out the boiling flasks and produce twice as much acid with only about the same amount of cleanup at the end of the run. But then I got to thinking, if I'm going to buy another boiling flask, why don't I buy a bigger one? So now I've got a 2-liter boiling flask. And it was a bit of a struggle to find a pan big enough for the oil bath that, you know, I wouldn't mind sacrificing for this and not using for cooking again, but I found one. So I'm going to be making, you know, a lot more nitric acid on this run. Now I'm not filling, even though this boiling flask is double the size of my 1-liter flask, I didn't put double the reactants in it because of the foam up issue that happens maybe 2/3 of the way through the reaction. It just seems to be as predictable as the sunrise. Everything's going to be going really good on the reaction, and then all of a sudden it's just going to get another gear, take off, and foam up. So I didn't fill it with double the reactants, even though the flask is double the size. I put about 1.5 times the reactants in it. It looks like I dribbled a little little oil on the heating element because it's smoking a little bit as it's heating up. So we'll see how this goes. And what I will probably do is, after the end of this run with this flask, I'll swap out my smaller 1-liter flask with another fresh batch of reactants and keep the distillation going, just so I get, you know, more than double the amount of nitric acid on this run, because nitric acid is just so damn useful. And another thing I'm doing a little different is I have a piece of sacrificial tubing over here that's gonna take the nitrogen dioxide gas that's produced in this process and just vent it far away from me, so I don't have to have it in my face while I'm working over here, because I'm going to be working over here on other projects on my large workbench while this is going on, and I can babysit this reaction, throttle the temperature as needed. Oh boy, I must have dribbled a lot of oil on the heating element. Well, it'll burn off soon enough. So anyway, this is just a sacrificial piece of tubing. It probably won't last long with exposure to nitrogen dioxide gas, but at least it'll get the fumes out of my face while I'm working on other things. And one project I'm working on is I'm going to be painting the inside of my new fume hood I've built. It's somewhat for protection from splashed chemicals, but mainly just to make it, I'm going to paint it white, just to make it lighter in color inside, so that the lights I've installed, the LED strip lights I've installed up in there, do a better job of lighting up the inside of it. The light will bounce around in there and everything will be brighter and lighter. So I'm going to paint the inside of this, get a couple coats of white paint on it, while I'm babysitting this increasingly smoky reaction. It'll burn off eventually. Okay, so I'll show you this as it's proceeding. Okay, it's been a few minutes. Things are starting to heat up. I have insulated the boiling flask and the glassware immediately before the condenser, just to try and drive more of the vapors into the condenser, because I tend to get a lot of refluxing over here in the top of the flask and in the glassware up here, and it just seems to take forever for the vapors to actually get over here and condense. So I've insulated it all, so hopefully there'll be less condensation over there. Try and keep as much heat in as possible. Left myself a little window so I can watch her boil over. It's not really showing up on the camera, but I can see in there. Also, I've put some support under the receiving flask in case the keck clip fails. I don't want the receiving flask falling off and dumping nitric acid all over the place and probably rolling off the table and breaking. And we know from my previous videos that making nitric acid is tough on keck clips. They don't last long, and all these clips have been used before, and they're all showing signs of degradation and imminent breakage. So I'm going to use them until they break and then replace them with new ones. I've got a bunch of new ones. They're dirt cheap, fortunately. Anyway, we've heated up enough that the smoking has stopped, and the condensation, the cooling water in the condenser's on. So just waiting for the reaction to start. I see a little bit of bubbling in there, but it's pretty slow at the moment. But it'll get going soon. I'm going to go get my painting supplies together and start painting the inside of the fume hood while this is going on. And in the future, I'll be able to do reactions like this inside a fume hood. Won't have to deal with stinky issues like the nitrogen dioxide gas. Alright, the reaction is going along nicely. I don't know if what's going on in the boiling flask is showing up on the video or not, but the reaction is going along nicely. Getting lots of condensation up here in the condenser. Concentrated red fuming nitric acid dripping into the receiving flask. And that keck clip's leaking a little bit of gas around it, but most of the nitrogen dioxide gas is being conducted far, far away from me, so it's not bothering me while I paint the inside of my fume hood, which is coming along nicely. I should probably have that done well before this reaction is completed. So things are working good. Well, I don't know if it's the larger volume of reactants in the flask or the larger surface area of the flask to absorb heat from the oil bath, but this reaction is just chugging along at an amazing rate. Look at how fast those drops are coming down. So this is great. This is really cooking along. Couldn't be much happier with this. Okay, foam up finally happened. Just as I thought the reaction was slowing down and coming to an end, it just took off. And got some serious foam up going on, but it seems to be contained. Fortunately, I didn't fill the beaker up as much as I would have thought I could using a double-sized beaker, but I was conservative with the amount I put in it, which is good. It doesn't look like it's going to be in any danger of actually foaming out of the beaker. Look at the rate the nitric acid is coming over now. Just crazy. But I'll take it. Hey, I'll take as much nitric acid as I can get. And when the reaction does finally slow down and stop, I've got my other boiling flask, my 1 liter one, sitting over here ready to go. And I will just put my personal protective equipment on and swap out the flasks and keep distilling. And I'll only have to clean up this mess once, and I'll get more than double the amount I normally get. Oh, and my sacrificial tubing is working great. It's I haven't hardly even got a whiff of nitrogen dioxide while I've been working over here painting the inside of my fume hood, which in the future I'll be able to do these stinky reactions in. So that's working pretty darn good. Yeah, the foaming has subsided. That's weird how that happens. It's like it gets close to the end of the reaction and then it just takes off. It's like the finale at a fireworks display. It sort of goes along at a steady pace, and then there's a big, massive explosion there at the end where they give it all they've got. It's kind of what happens with this reaction. Yeah, the rate at which the vapor's coming over has slowed down too now that the foaming has subsided. Very strange. But at least it's predictable, so I can deal with it. Alright, in the time it's taken for this reaction to pretty much run its course, painted my fume hood. I need to get another coat on the outside, but I got 2 coats on the inside. It's looking pretty darn good. Looking like a professional piece of equipment. Anyway, on this, the reaction has really slowed down. The drips are coming over pretty infrequently now. I think it's time to call it and shut this down. Let it cool off a bit so I can swap out the boiling flasks and start the second one going. while the oil's still hot, and collect some more. Got a good little bit in there right now. Going to add to that. Probably at least another 100 milliliters based on experience from the what I get out of the 1 liter flask. So I'm going to need to put my personal protective equipment on and pay close attention to what I'm doing, so I probably won't film them swapping out the flasks. Okay, I've got the 1 liter flask attached. Things are starting to heat up again. The oil never really got cold, so I'm expecting this reaction to take off pretty quickly. I'm trying something a little different this time. I poured the semi-molten sodium bisulfate out into this flask here. And that should make cleanup of the boiling flask a lot easier. In fact, I need to find some disposable container to just dump this into while it's still semi-molten and get rid of it. So I can clean up this flask, or clean up this beaker too. So that worked pretty well, because it takes hours, even on the heat, to dissolve the slug of solidified sodium bisulfate in there. So this should be very helpful to get that out while it's still hot. And there's a lot less material in there that needs to be dissolved. Anyway, I'm going to put foil back on this and let the second distillation go. And then once it's done, I'll disassemble it and clean it, and we'll look at our yield of nitric acid. Oh, and by the way, I am wearing vinyl gloves, which according to some YouTube videos I've seen are not attacked so badly by concentrated nitric acid, but just to be safe, I'm wearing the leather gloves over them while I'm working with this stuff, just in case. Plus, of course, it's hot, and these don't give me any protection from the heat. So I'm thinking the leather plus these, I'm pretty well protected, but I'm still, you know, not taking any chances. I don't need any more nitric acid burns. Don't need to start a fire. So I'm being really careful. Okay, the second reaction is well along. Getting some good condensation over here. I took the 2 liter boiling flask, set it over here, and I filled it to the top with hot water. Not quite boiling hot water, and I'll tell you what, almost all of the sodium bisulfite that was in there has dissolved already. It's only been a couple minutes. So dumping it out while it's still semi-liquid really made a big difference in the cleanup time. So that was fantastic. So I'll do the same thing with this one when it's done. So I dumped it into this beaker over here. I've got the beaker on the heat right now to keep the sodium bisulfite semi-liquid, so I can pour it out of the beaker. I've already poured some out. Poured it over here into this, basically just a paper bowl covered with aluminum foil. And I think the aluminum foil is being attacked by the hot mixture, because there's a lot of nitrogen dioxide coming out of it, but I had to do something with it, so I don't know. Let me see if I can dump off any more here. I'm sure it'll harden very quickly. This isn't coming out. I'll do the same with this beaker, though. I'll just fill it with hot water, and I'm sure the small amount that's left in there will dissolve quickly. But I'll probably wait until I get the stuff from this second reaction in it. It's coming along quickly. It started up right away because the oil was still hot. So it's going quickly. Probably be over in not too long. Maybe I have time to get a second coat on the outside of my fume hood. We'll see. That is really interesting. It looks like a souffle, but I would not eat it. Okay, the second distillation's almost done. The drops are coming less and less often, so it's about time to shut this down. I'll do the same as I did with the 2 liter flask. I will dump out the semi-liquid sodium bisulfate, and that'll make cleaning up the flask a lot easier, or cleaning up the flask a lot easier. I won't have to dissolve it all out. I'll just have to dissolve what stays in after dumping it out, which seems to just take a few minutes. The 1 liter flask is all cleaned up and looking gorgeous. The beaker I dumped it into is all cleaned up. I think I'm just going to dump this direct onto this pile over here and let it harden up. So this went pretty well. It looks like I've got a lot of liquid in there. But I know from experience, you know, don't count your nitric acid liters before you measure them. But I'm expecting to get about roughly 2.5 times as much as I normally get. We'll see. So instead of about 100 milliliters, it should be maybe 250 milliliters. Maybe a little more, because I'm running this a little longer than usual. We'll see. I will measure it up, and we'll see what it is. Alright, second distillation's done. The glassware's soaking in baking soda and water solution. Got my product here, and boy, that does look like a lot. So I'll have to measure it out here shortly. And the 1 liter flask is over here cleaning up very quickly again, just like the 2 liter flask did. Filled it to the brim with hot water after I dumped out all the semi-liquid sodium bisulfate I could. And what was left in there is dissolving before my very eyes. So it's not going to take a couple hours like it normally does to clean that flask. It's going to be clean almost immediately. Excellent. So speaking of cleaning, I need to do some more cleanup work here. I got a pot full of hot oil. I've got to clean all this glassware. I've got to dump that out into a beaker and measure my yield and figure out how much water I'm going to have to add to dilute it to the azeotrope, 68% azeotrope. But first, I think I'm going to have lunch. I'm hungry. Getting late in the day. Alrighty. So, got what is it? About 225 milliliters. Not quite as much as I was expecting, but hey, it never is, right? Still, that's pretty good. I think it's almost 1/4 of a liter of highly concentrated nitric acid. And I'm going to dilute this down to the 68% azeotrope, so I'm going to have even more. So this worked out pretty darn well. So I got all this nitric acid now. A couple of Keck clips are probably ready for the trash, but the rest of them will probably be good for one more distillation at least. But you know, I got more Keck clips. They're cheap. I've got plenty of them. So I'm still making nitric acid cheaper than I can buy it, I'm pretty sure. So this is great. This is a lot of nitric acid too. I've got a project in mind that's going to take a fair amount, I think. So between this and what I've got left over from the last couple of runs, I think I've got enough to do it. So I'm going to try a little experiment. I'm wearing vinyl gloves, which I have heard are not as dangerous when in contact with concentrated nitric acid. So I'm going to try a little side-by-side experiment. I've got a vinyl glove and I've got a nitro glove here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dribble a little concentrated nitric acid on both of them, and we'll see what happens. I think I'm going to start with the vinyl glove, because I know what happens when I do it with the nitro glove. Well, pretty much nothing happening. Okay. Alrighty, not much happening. So let's try the nitro glove. Oh yes, that's what we expect to happen. Oh yeah. Ooh, nasty smoke. So I guess the vinyl gloves I got on are pretty good. I mean, they're not going to protect me forever from the nitric acid, but give me a chance to go wash it off if I get it splashed on my hands or dribbled on my hands, I think. And what I was doing today was I was wearing these underneath the leather gloves. The leather gloves were going to take the bulk of it. Anything happened. And certainly because I was handling hot glassware too, I needed something. So the leather gloves were working for that. And then I wore these underneath just in case I splashed any on the leather gloves and it's had time to soak through. So I think I've got a good combination of gloves now that's a little safer than the nitro gloves. And I've got a lot of nitric acid. The distillations went without pain. I've got a new way of cleaning the glassware by dumping the semi-liquid sodium bisulfate product out before it hardens in the boiling flasks, and then the boiling flasks clean up real quick. Here's the 1 liter flask. It's just a little tiny bit. Oh, actually it's dissolved. Okay, it's all gone. So cool. It's all gone. So that took no time at all. And you know, last time I had to boil it for 2 hours in the oil bath to get rid of it all. So that's great. Every time I do this, I get a little better at it. So wonderful. And just one more parting shot. Thanks for watching. Bye.